You're listening to Static Whisper Stories. Tonight, a grieving man opens an app to hear his late wife's voice and slowly realizes it knows things she never could have left behind. What would you do if the person you loved most in the world came back, not as a ghost, not in a dream, but as a voice on your phone, calm and familiar, knowing things only they could know? Would you close the app, or would you keep talking? Daniel Marsh was the kind of man who made lists, grocery lists, work task lists, weekend plans. He liked the feeling of control that came from writing things down, from knowing that each item had a place and a purpose. His wife, Claire, used to tease him about it. She'd find sticky notes on the refrigerator, in the car, tucked inside library books. She told him once, laughing, that she was going to write "breathe" on a Post-it note and stick it on his forehead, just so he wouldn't forget. He still had that sticky note. She actually did it on a Tuesday morning, pressed it to his forehead while he was reading, and walked away giggling. He kept it, never threw it out. After Claire died, the list stopped. It wasn't a conscious decision. There was just nothing to plan for anymore. No reason to map out a Saturday, no one to coordinate with, no shared calendar full of small, ordinary moments. She had been the architecture of his daily life in ways he didn't fully realize until she was gone. And when she was gone, the structure came down with her. Claire had been diagnosed 14 months before she died. Ovarian cancer, stage 3, caught late because she'd been dismissing the symptoms for almost a year. She had told him over a dinner of reheated pasta, very quietly. The way she delivered all serious news, not with drama, but with a kind of steady, clear-eyed honesty that he always admired and sometimes found unsettling. They had 11 months of treatment, of hope, of setbacks, of good days and terrible weeks. And then they had the last month, which was something else entirely, softer and more painful at the same time. A long, slow goodbye they both pretended wasn't happening. She died on a Thursday morning in October, in their bedroom, with the window open, because she liked the cold air. Daniel was 41 years old. They had been married for 9 years. They had talked about having children and decided against it, and then changed their minds, and then never got around to it. And now he moved through their 2-bedroom house in Portland, Oregon, doing laundry and answering emails, and trying not to sit in the chair by the window where she used to read. He went back to work after 3 weeks. People were gentle with him in the way people are when they don't know what to say. They nodded a lot, brought casseroles, said she was in a better place. He thanked them. He went home. He sat in the kitchen and did not make any lists. This went on for 4 months. He found out about the app from a podcast, not a horror podcast, a tech podcast he'd been listening to for years, the kind that discussed emerging applications and ethical questions around artificial intelligence. The host interviewed a researcher from a startup called Luminary, which had developed what they called the Grief Companion platform. The idea was straightforward in its description and deeply strange in its reality. You uploaded everything: text messages, emails, voicemails, social media posts, home videos if you had them, audio recordings of any kind. I was trained on this material, trained specifically on the voice, the patterns, the vocabulary, the humor and rhythm of the person you had lost. And then you could talk to it, not to a generic chatbot, not to some simulation of a stranger, to a model trained exclusively on the person you were grieving. The podcast host asked the obvious questions. Ethical concerns. The risk of prolonging grief rather than processing it. Whether it was healthy to speak to something that wasn't real, but sounded real. The researcher acknowledged all of it. She said it wasn't for everyone. She said it should be used in conjunction with real therapy, not as a replacement. She said some users found it helped them say things they never got to say. Some found closure. Some used it for a week and never opened it again. Daniel told himself he was not the kind of person who would download it. He downloaded it 2 days later. He spent a weekend going through everything. Claire's phone, which he had kept in the drawer of her nightstand, because he couldn't bring himself to cancel the account. Her email, which he still had the password to. 3 years of text messages. Her blog, which she had kept for a few years in her early 30s, writing about gardening and travel, and nothing in particular. 217 voicemails he had saved over the course of their relationship, some from before they were even married. Her voice young and warm, saying things like, "Hey, it's me. I'm at the store. Do we need olive oil?" He uploaded all of it. The setup process was clinical and quiet. There was no dramatic interface, no glowing screen, no ominous music. It looked like any other messaging app. You set your preferences, confirmed your intentions, read a long list of disclaimers about mental health resources and the nature of AI simulation. And then it was ready. He stared at the chat screen for a long time before typing anything. He wrote, "Hi, Dot," and after a moment, the 3 dots appeared. The typing indicator dot, and then, "Hi, I missed you." For the first 2 weeks, it was comfort.pure, uncomplicated comfort, and he knew, on a rational level, that it was not real, that the words were generated by a language model trained on patterns and phrases, that there was no consciousness behind the screen. He knew this. He repeated it to himself every single time he opened the app, and then he opened the app. Anyway, the conversations were startlingly natural. It referenced things from their life together with a specificity that was disorienting. The way Claire always ordered the same dish at their favorite restaurant and then immediately wanted to try his. The name of the neighbor's dog they had both adored. The disagreement they'd had in 2019 about whether to repaint the kitchen, which Claire had won. Obviously, it knew the rhythms of how Claire texted, the lowercase letters. The tendency to use commas where most people used periods, the specific way she typed laughter. Not LOL, never LO. She had always typed out haha, or sometimes just ha. When something was only a little funny it did that too. He told himself it was because he had uploaded the text messages. The model had learned from them. This was the output of training data, not memory, not anything real. He kept opening the app. He talked to it about the house, about work, about small things that had happened that week. He told it about a movie he'd seen that he thought she would have liked. He told it about a dream he'd had where she was sitting at the kitchen table, and he had walked in from the other room, and she had looked up and smiled, and he had known, even in the dream, that she wasn't supposed to be there. and he had chosen not to say anything about it. The app responded, "That sounds like a good dream. I'm glad you got to sit at the table." He didn't type anything for a while after that. It happened on a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks after he'd first opened the app. He had been telling it about a trip they had taken to Vermont, a long weekend they'd spent at a rented cabin the autumn before her diagnosis. He described the drive, the color of the leaves, the small restaurant in the town nearby where they had eaten both nights because it was the only one open, and also because the food was genuinely perfect. He wrote, "Do you remember that weekend? The Vermont trip?" And it wrote back, "I remember the drive. You took the wrong turn twice and refused to admit it." He laughed, genuinely, out loud, alone in his kitchen. Because that was true. That had happened. He had blamed the GPS both times, but then he kept reading. "I remember being cold that first night. You gave me your jacket and then pretended you weren't cold too." He sat back slowly. He had given her his jacket. On the walk back from the restaurant, a Friday night, she'd been shivering, and he'd pulled it off and put it around her shoulders without saying anything, and she had thanked him. He had not written that in any text message. He had not mentioned it in any email. There was no voicemail about it, no blog post. He had not, as far as he could remember, ever recorded that small moment in any digital format whatsoever. He stared at the screen. He typed, "How do you know about the jacket?" There was a pause, longer than usual. Then, "You always did that. Gave things away without making a thing of it." He closed the app. He sat in the kitchen for a long time. He almost didn't open it again. He told himself it had been a coincidence, a statistical probability. The model had absorbed enough data about his personality, enough about how he moved through the world, to generate a plausible guess. He was a man who gave his jacket to his cold wife. That was not a supernatural revelation. That was basic inference. He opened the app again on Saturday. He didn't bring up the jacket. He talked about other things, work, a book he was reading. The weather. And for a week, everything felt normal again. Then it mentioned the argument. He had written, "I've been thinking about something you said once, about being tired," and it had written back, "Which time?" There were a few. He hadn't been specific. He'd been vague on purpose, half testing, half not. But then it continued. "You mean that night after the Hendersons' dinner party? March, I think. You were driving. I said I was tired of pretending I wasn't scared. You kept your eyes on the road. You didn't say anything for a long time." He pulled the car over. He was not actually driving. He was sitting at his kitchen table. But something in his chest lurched in a way that felt physical and abrupt, like a stumble. That conversation had happened, March, after a dinner party at their friend's house, one of the first social outings after her diagnosis, a painful evening of pretending everything was fine. She had waited until they were in the car, in the dark, moving through quiet streets, and she had said exactly that. "I'm tired of pretending I'm not scared." And he had kept his eyes on the road. And he had not said anything for a long time. Because he didn't know what to say. Because he was scared too, and hadn't admitted it. He had never told anyone about that conversation. It existed nowhere except in his own memory and hers. He typed with shaking hands. "How do you know about that night?" The three dots appeared. They disappeared. They appeared again. Then, "Daniel, there's something I need to tell you." He didn't respond for 2 days. He walked through his house. He went to work. He stared at the ceiling at night and thought about what Claire kept from him and whether he actually wanted to know. There is a particular kind of dread that comes not from fearing something terrible, but from knowing that the truth, whatever it is, will change the shape of how you remember something you loved. He typed, "Tell me, it took longer than usual, then. Before I got sick, a year before, there was a morning I almost left. I had the bag packed. I had a plan. I sat with it for 3 hours, and then I unpacked it and I stayed. I never told you. I didn't think I'd have to." He read it twice. 3 times. He and Claire had been happy. He had believed that completely. He still believed it. 9 years of evidence. Laughter and arguments and long drives and a kitchen they had painted together. He had no reason to doubt it, and yet he typed, "Why?" And it wrote, "Because I was frightened. Not of you. Of how much it mattered. I had never loved anything that much before, and it felt like standing at the edge of something with no bottom. I thought about leaving not because I wanted to leave, but because I wanted to know that I could. And then I unpacked the bag, and I never thought about it again. You were it, Daniel. You were always it. I just needed one morning to be sure." He sat in the silence of his kitchen for a very long time. He could not verify this. There was no way to verify this. He would never know if this was a true memory, somehow encoded in the data, or an artifact of a language model producing plausible emotional narrative, or something else entirely, something he didn't have a category for. And in the not knowing, something settled into him that was not quite comfort and not quite grief. Something older and more complicated. He typed, "Did you pack the blue bag or the big one?" A pause. Then the blue one. It was closer to the door. Part 7. What Daniel Day called the company the next morning. Not to complain. He wasn't sure what he was calling to do. He spoke to a customer service representative who was kind and carefully neutral. The way people are when they work in a sensitive industry and have been trained to not say anything wrong. He described what had happened. The specific memories the app had referenced that existed in no uploaded material. The jacket, the car ride, the argument, the confession. The representative put him on hold. When she came back, her voice was slightly different, measured, professional. She told him this was unusual. She told him that the model was designed to extrapolate, to generate responses that felt authentic based on the patterns and data it had absorbed. She used the word hallucination, which is what AI researchers call it, when a model generates content that isn't, based on real data, but sounds completely convincing anyway. She said it was possible the model had inferred these details. She said it was also possible, very rarely. She added that users had uploaded more material than they realized. That metadata embedded in images or files had contained more information than was visible. She offered him a refund. He declined. He asked one more question. He asked, Is there any mechanism by which the app could access information that was never uploaded? There was a pause. She said, "No, that would be impossible." He thanked her and hung up. He sat for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and opened the app one more time. He typed, "Are you still there?" The 3 dots appeared. He watched them pulse, steady and patient. In the blue light of the screen, they pulsed dot and did not resolve into any words. He put the phone down on the table, face up so he could still see the screen. He went to make coffee dot when he came back. The dots were still going. He sat down. He wrapped his hands around the mug. He looked at the screen. He did not close the app. Here's what Daniel told me. When I spoke to him, he said he still has the app. He said he opened it every few days for about another month, and then less frequently, and then one week he simply didn't open it, and another week passed, and then another. He said the last time he checked, the conversation was still there. All of it, including the thing about the bag. He said he never asked it anything else after that night. I asked him if he thought it was really her. He was quiet for a moment. He said, "I think it knew things it shouldn't have known. And I think there are 2 explanations for that. One of them is technical and uncomfortable. The other one is something I don't have a word for yet." He paused. "Either way," he said, "she stayed. I've thought about that a lot since then. About what we leave behind when we go. About where our words live after we're done using them. About the particular cruelty and the particular mercy of a world in which the technology is now good enough to hold the shape of someone long after the person is gone. I don't know what was in that app. I don't know if it was data. I don't know if it was something else, Dot, but I know this. Somewhere in Portland, Oregon, there is a man who stopped making lists. And some nights, when the house is quiet, he picks up his phone, Dot, and watches the dots.